Thank you for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here for the presentation. As Alex said, we're going to be spending the next hour or so going through LinkedIn, hopefully shine a bit of a spotlight on some of the things that are unique to LinkedIn as a platform, some of the reasons why you may want to use it to promote your business, and hopefully finish up with a few insights and a few ideas in terms of strategy, how you might take away what we learned today and put it into practice. We've got a brief agenda. I will warn you, I do tend to go off piste sometimes if I think it's worth doing, but we will kind of try and stick to this agenda. As I've said, we'll go through some of the strengths of the platform, and we'll explain some of the things that you would see when you were using the platform, and finish up with a few examples and ideas that you might want to take away and think about to put into practice. So hopefully you find it useful. As Alex said, there's an opportunity to put some questions in the chat. We will find some time at the end of the presentation to kind of answer any questions that you do have. So do bear that in mind. If there's anything that's not clear, please make a note, put it in the chat. Alex will prompt me if she needs to during the presentation, but as we've said, there will be time at the end to answer questions as well. So let's crack on. I'm guessing everyone here is here because they're interested in the kind of professional aspect of LinkedIn, and how LinkedIn affords itself a different type of audience to other platforms like Google, Bing, some of the social media platforms. The essential reason for using LinkedIn would be that it is the place that you would go to reach a more professional audience. There's no kind of beating around the bush about it. It is very much the place where professionals, decision makers, CEOs, department heads, all of those kind of people, those kind of that kind of job title, if you like, that you can find them pretty easily on LinkedIn. It differs from something like Google, for instance, and search engines, in that you would reach out to Google and Bing with a keyword, and you would be looking for information based on your keyword. With LinkedIn, it's slightly different. You're reaching out to people based on their demographic and the information that they've given over to the platform. In many ways, it's similar to social platforms. When we set up our social channels, we're very much given some of our demographic detail over to those channels. But with things like Facebook and Instagram, it kind of begins and ends with, who are you, how old are you, and what are you interested in? Again, with LinkedIn, there's an extra level there, or an extra layer of detail there, that whether we are conscious of doing or not, we do give up that information quite freely to LinkedIn. We want to showcase our skills, so our kind of accreditation, if we've got any exam qualifications, anything that we're interested in that ticks a box from a professional level. We also obviously give our details to LinkedIn about where we work. So, if you look for me, for instance, you'll know that I work at Footprint Digital, and I'm sure you guys will be giving that information over as well. Those are things that, you can't really tap into using search engines to a great degree, and certainly not social media either. But they're there, they're inherent there, they're kind of baked into the platform on LinkedIn. So they very much are the route into a more professional audience. And very often I talk about those people as decision makers. It's the people who, have the credit card in their hand for big deals, or about to pick up the phone to have a really important conversation. As well as that, there's a lot of kind of targeting options that we get available with LinkedIn that we don't necessarily have on the other platforms. I've mentioned the fact that we give over our details about where we work, etc. All of that kind of stuff is there in the platform, and unlike other platforms, it's available there when we want to go and market and when we want to kind of advertise ourselves. We'll talk a bit more in detail later on about what that actually means and what you can do with it and how you can kind of take advantage of that. But there are several layers of kind of targeting that we give over. After this presentation, go and take a look at your profile and what it says about you. Within a few minutes, you'll be able to establish maybe 5 or 6 points about yourself that someone could kind of tap into and use to be able to reach you. It's the reason why we see content on LinkedIn, and it's the reason why sometimes we see messages drop into our inbox on LinkedIn as well. People have found us using various means and various tactics. Just to finish on this, it is very much B2B focused. If you're looking to sell products, clothing, iPhones, whatever it might be, products in bulk, then LinkedIn is probably not the platform for you. If you're looking for people who are interested in making a very quick purchase or a very quick inquiry, there are other platforms available. LinkedIn is very much a case where B2B can kind of network, they can foster relationships, and you can promote yourself as a kind of industry authority within your realm, within the right people or the right audience on there. So it is very much B2B focused. Having said that, it's not just about networking, it's not just about brand awareness. It can be about sales, and it can be about lead generation, and definitely about lead generation. So there's a lot of different kind of elements to it that we'll try and unpack today in some degree, and give you the useful information that you'll need to take away. One of the things that we do know about LinkedIn is that the audience are very much engaged. Again, from your own experience, you'll know that if you're following people, it's generally because they're very much involved in the platform and they're releasing content and they're sharing useful information on a regular basis. You may yourself be one of those people who does exactly the same. And generally, the content on LinkedIn is very high quality, and it's very specific. It's very relevant to the people that it's been shown to. Again, there's an element on social media in particular when you'll be delivered content that is just not relevant. It's not very good quality. It's very throwaway, very flippant. You don't get that to a high degree on LinkedIn. The content that you're delivered is usually of great standard. And again, as marketers, it's our job to make sure that continues to be the case, and we put the right kind of high quality content in front of the right kind of people as well. There are lots of options on LinkedIn. We'll go into a few details about what that actually means and what they look like in a few seconds. But there are lots of ways of reaching people. We're all familiar with what the LinkedIn interface looks like, I'm assuming. So we know that there's content that appears on the feed in the same way that it does maybe on other social channels. But you can get messages dropped into your inbox in LinkedIn. You can see kind of display type advertising and video content displayed in various placements across the platform as well. There are lots of different options. The reason it's interesting or valuable to kind of be aware of all the options is the options sit nicely into the marketing funnel. And so if it is a case of you're looking to increase brand awareness, very much top of funnel kind of focus, there are ad formats that will be designed specifically for that purpose on the platform. As we move lower down the funnel to mid and to bottom of funnel, the options that you should be looking at in terms of formats change. And so you may be looking to connect more on a personal level with people if they're identified as being an audience at a lower level on the marketing funnel. And again, there's formats for that, which we'll explore in the presentation. There's probably a few things in terms of your initial intention when you're looking at LinkedIn. What is it that you're trying to achieve? The two main things would be brand awareness and create leads. In terms of brand awareness, it's a great way to get in front of decision makers. Again, other platforms, you kind of have the opportunity to cast your net far and wide, which is great. Reach and visibility, big numbers, all those kind of things. And you can do the same on LinkedIn. But one of the things that you do get the opportunity to do on LinkedIn is almost kind of filter and layer your targeting options so that you can be really assured that the people that you're putting your brand in front of and you want your brand to be made aware to are the decision makers, are the correct audience. You do that by layering the targeting, which again, we'll go into detail. But on other platforms, for instance, Facebook or Instagram, if you were doing a brand exercise on that, you may be looking at trying to reach, tens or even hundreds of thousands of people, with the knowledge that within that large group of people, there's probably a 5–10% audience of that that are the ones you actually want to reach. Well, because of the kind of information we give over on LinkedIn, you can actually narrow that down to the degree where you don't have to put yourself in front of such a big audience, but the smaller audience that you do reach are very much the ones that you want to be put in front of. LinkedIn does recommend that when you create a campaign, you have an audience of 50,000 people. Now, some of you may think that's small, some of you may think that's big. It depends on the circumstances, I guess. It's a pretty healthy number and not unheard of. But very often, if you're trying to connect with decision makers in a specific vertical, a specific job title, for instance, all of those kind of things, even on a UK and national level, there may not be 50,000 of those people. So it doesn't really make sense to kind of use that figure as a kind of a goal in any way of setting up your audiences. The actual figure that you may be looking at could be 2,000 people. One of the examples that I've recently worked with was people looking to connect with decision makers of a certain standard or certain level within NHS healthcare practices. Now, there's not 50,000 of those top senior kind of decision makers within the health service in the UK. There's probably about 20,000. Using the targeting, we were able to identify those and make sure that we had a really interesting audience that we could get in front of. The second thing about advertising on LinkedIn, obviously you want to kind of foster relationships. You want to start to engage with people. It isn't kind of, very quick transactional process like it might be, for instance, on Google. This is kind of, you're in it for the long term. The contracts and the sales that do get generated through advertising on LinkedIn are generally long term, or certainly have more of a lifespan than the quick transactional side of things on something like Google. So you want to make sure that when you're delivering your content, you're connecting on a level that's going to foster or kind of introduce that element of conversation and that relationship building. And again, there's lots of things on LinkedIn that facilitate that. In terms of why you would turn to it initially, and this isn't just from a paid perspective, it is very much a case of looking at it as a bigger picture. I often think of LinkedIn as being at a huge, ongoing, never-ending networking event. It is that opportunity to kind of step in and out of the room as often as you want to and be part of that networking event and that networking conversation. To do that, one of the best things that you can do is share your opinion. And share content that you create, that your business is involved in, all of those kind of things, and put yourself forward as a kind of, from a thought leadership perspective. Again, when I'm trying to kind of sum up things like this in simple terms, it's a bit like trying to be the smartest person in the room, and that's not an egotistical thing. It is from a perspective of coming in and sharing knowledge and giving information away. So it is kind of, important to kind of make sure that you understand this isn't a kind of a quick fix, and it's not something that's kind of, like Google, you're not necessarily in it for the next 5 minutes. It is an ongoing thing. It's a good thing to remember because, again, if you're going to do this properly and you're going to get the right B2B type engagement, leads, and business from all of this, there is a time factor involved that isn't there. And certainly isn't inherent on some of the other platforms that you can use to market from a digital perspective. Leading on from that, then, once you've kind of fostered or you've found the audience and you've started to connect with them through thought leadership, through sharing content, all of those kind of things, it's really important not to waste the effort that you've put in at that point, and do something with the information. Again, we'll kind of touch on this in a few slides later, but you can collect the data about the people who are engaging with your content and use that strategically, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, whatever it might be, certainly kind of, you know, further down the line, to further refine and optimize your marketing strategy and your campaigns and the delivery and the performance that you can get from them. So there's a few things there to make sure that you put in place. If you don't kind of acknowledge that and do something about that, you're stepping in and out of the room, and every time you're going back into the room, you're kind of doing it from a, you know, ground zero perspective. When you step in and out of the LinkedIn room, that networking opportunity, if you've put the right things in place, the audience lists, the data capture, all of that kind of stuff, when you step in and out of that room, you're just building on the conversation you've already had the previous day, the week, whatever it might be. And so cumulatively, the effect of all of this should be quite big. The platform itself is very easy to get involved in. If you've got a profile page, business page, etc., you're just a click away from the ads manager or the business center in LinkedIn. And if you haven't already kind of explored that, I would encourage you to go and have a look at that. There's no cost involved. You don't have to sign up for anything. The only time you will be charged by LinkedIn is when you actually activate a campaign and put it out there, and you're charged on a pretty much a cost per click basis, same as something like Google. Whenever someone clicks on your content, engages with your content to that degree, you'll be charged a one-off fee by LinkedIn. It's probably worth mentioning that LinkedIn is comparably more expensive to something like Google. But again, if you do this correctly, and add all the kind of features and do everything as you should, there's a level of efficiency there that means you're not going to pay a premium. If you're a bit kind of slapdash and don't really understand what it is you're doing, LinkedIn will put a premium on it. In the same way that Google values relevance, so too does LinkedIn. So the more relevant your content to the audience that you've chosen to get in front of, the better and more efficient your campaigns will be. And that also filters down from a cost perspective as well. So do get involved, have a look, see what it looks like. When you're exploring that, think about what it is that you're trying to achieve. Again, there's so many different options once you kind of go down the route to creating a campaign on LinkedIn. But are you trying to reach people at top of funnel, mid funnel, bottom of funnel? How do you want them to engage with you? How do you want them to contact you? Are you happy for them to visit the website? Is your website so strong that it can take up the mantle, if you like, once you've got them to the website, and do a job of converting them or getting them over the line? Do you want them to stay on LinkedIn? Do you want them to just continue engaging with your content for the foreseeable future, while you kind of foster that relationship from top to mid to bottom of funnel? Or maybe you're trying to connect with an audience who you know are going to pretty much make an inquiry pretty quickly. There's an ad format for that. You can literally, without people moving away from the LinkedIn platform, you can get them to fill in a form on your content on LinkedIn. They go straight to you, and then you can kind of pick up the mantle there and kind of do what it is that you want to do with that lead. So have a clear objective, because again, then that will influence the type of options that there are in front of you from a creative and also from a strategic point of view. One thing I always say, regardless of what it is that you're doing from a digital marketing perspective, and regardless of what platform you're on as well, make sure you do understand your audience. It's great as a marketer when you go into LinkedIn and you see all the options that are available to you. I could literally find someone who worked in the insurance business, in the Colchester area, age between 40, 45, and is interested in travel. I mean, you know, I've literally just made that up, but you could, you know, kind of drill down your target audience into that kind of detail. You'll already know a lot of information about who it is that you want to connect with and what their needs are. And that's also a good point. You know, make sure that you're aware of what it is you're trying to do in terms of solving a problem, breaking down a barrier, being useful, essentially. But make sure that you do understand your target audience and then apply it to the options that are available to you on the platform. It's very surprising when you do that, the kind of doors that open up to you. You could literally say, well, we just want to attract people who are interested in construction, for instance. That's available. It's very easy to find, and it's a huge audience. But if you start to apply different layers of targeting to that, you could find that your construction audience goes from 1 million to 2,500, for instance, because you're connecting with the right people within the construction business. So again, understand your audience and apply it to the platform. You'll definitely get better performance, better results. There's a few things in terms of delivery that are worth mentioning as well. You will need to understand what you're doing with your budget and your bidding strategy. One of the things that I see far too often is that people see not just LinkedIn, other platforms as well, as a quick opportunity to just reach people at scale. They are, there's no doubt in that at all. But if you haven't got the resource to deal with that, or to kind of service that kind of reach and that kind of size of audience, you're going to be spreading yourself very thin. I guess the point to make here is be realistic about what it is that you can invest and what you have at your kind of available from a resource perspective, and make sure that you cut your cloth accordingly. There's no use going after an audience of 1 million people across the UK if you've only got £500 to spend over the next 3 months, for instance. So make sure you're kind of aware of what that is. Linked to that, there are a few things in terms of your the options around the bidding side of things that you can look at in LinkedIn as well. I've mentioned cost per click or pay per click. Whenever someone engages with your content, clicks on your content, and either visits your website or goes through to content that's hosted by LinkedIn or LinkedIn Forms, etc., you'll pay for that click. There are options to kind of pay for volume and visibility, and not necessarily clicks. So again, if you're talking top of funnel, that's always quite attractive. If you're not so certain about who it is that you're trying to go after, or you're exploring and you're learning through the process of marketing who it is that you need to target and move down the funnel with, the actual reach and visibility side of things can be quite good. You know, I can get in front of 100,000 people on LinkedIn, and then I'll look at what they do, and I'll decide on what they've done, based on what they've done, what my next move will be. So there's a few things there to make sure that you're aware of. I've been to lots of presentations myself, and kind of sat where you're sitting now and listened to people in the industry, marketing from various different platforms, talk about how sophisticated the platforms are, and they are, certainly compared to when I started using them 15 years ago. But it's always good to kind of highlight the fact that you could understand the system and have all the kind of technical aspects nailed down and absolutely under control. If your creative doesn't hit the spot and doesn't tick the box, then you're probably going to fall flat. You can understand all the technicals, the kind of background to it, the targeting, all of that kind of stuff. If your messaging doesn't land, then all of that has been in vain. So again, you know, it's not just a case of getting 1 or 2 things right. You do really have to look at the bigger picture and get everything right. I think the last time this was mentioned to me in a presentation that I was watching, I was in front of some people at Google, and they were saying that the stats around compelling content are even greater than they used to be. I think it's probably because we're so used to engaging with content and consuming content online now. Our expectation of what that content should be is far more far higher than it used to be maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Not always the case, you know, people still like to see videos of cats on TikTok and all that kind of rubbish. But certainly from a LinkedIn perspective and from a B2B perspective, your content has to be really sharp, smart, engaging. And if we go back to the point I raised a few slides ago, what you're essentially trying to do is connect with someone by offering something helpful, something useful. You're solving a problem for them. You're breaking down a barrier. It's those kind of things to start thinking about when you're creating your content, because that's the kind of thing that lands. USPs are great. They back up the problem solving element, but they're not good enough in themselves. You know, everyone has an established business. Everyone delivers to the UK. Everyone is smart. Everyone is brilliant. All of those kind of things. It's the kind of element that you add on top of that that says, I understand what your problem is, and I've got the fix for it. And again, that goes to make creating compelling, creative, not just LinkedIn, but other platforms as well. And do understand what it is in terms of the conversion side of things that you're trying to achieve. It's a small point, but I try to flag up to people I'm working with, there are 3 things that you need to get right. Around those 3 things, there's lots of different kind of features and elements as well. But essentially, the 3 things are your target audience. That can be based on demographics, interests, the profiles that we've talked about on LinkedIn already. It can be your keyword research. It can be all sorts of different things. But that's the first element. That's your targeting and how you're going to identify the audience and enable yourself to put yourself in front of them. The second one is the creative, which we've just talked about. It's all very well understanding, you know, you're in front of the right audience, but if you're not showing them the right content, again, you're going to fall flat. So that's the second element. The third element is linked to the conversion process. And I often liken this to Ryanair. Stick with me, I know where I'm going with this, and I think it makes sense. But the third element is where you send people and where you kind of deliver people. You could have the best targeted audience that's possible, the best creative. But if via a click on that creative, you're sending someone to a website, a web page, or whatever, that doesn't make sense in terms of that journey. Either the content is just not up to scratch, it's completely off topic, or unexpected. That third element then can land, you know, doesn't land at all. And so all the effort that you've put in up to that point, taking advantage of all of those features within the platform, it finishes. The relationship stops there. That person thinks, I'm not in the right place, and then goes somewhere else. The Ryanair analogy is, if you fly to Paris with Ryanair, you don't actually go to Paris. You're about an hour away on a coach. And if you're sending your digital traffic from one platform to a destination that is an hour away from Paris when they were expecting to be in Paris, they're just going to go somewhere else that will get them to Paris quicker than you did. Again, hopefully that explained it. It sits right in my brain anyway. We'll go into a little bit of more detail now about the targeting options. These are 3 pretty basic ones, which we've probably talked about already. Demographic, you can reach people by age, gender, location, all of those kind of things. They're the basics. They're the kind of things that, you know, outside of digital as well, they're the kind of things that people talk about in terms of targeting. However, with LinkedIn, we've got some extra features. We can go after industry. So I've mentioned construction. But there is any kind of vertical, any industry that you can think of business-wise, there will be something in LinkedIn that you can identify. Travel and tourism, entertainment, retail, etc., etc. It's all there. Company size, quite an interesting one. I've been working with a company recently who wants to connect with new businesses. Now, new businesses are generally small to medium enterprises. So they're not going to be the kind of businesses that employ 10,000 plus people. They're going to be the kind of businesses that maybe employ 50 people, maybe less, maybe a few hundred. You can identify company size or people connected with companies of a certain size on LinkedIn and use that as a layer of targeting. Company name, Obviously, again, I mentioned, you can find me as Footprint. If you wanted to market to a group of people who worked at Footprint Digital, you could find them. It's easy to do. Growth rate, interesting one. Again, you wouldn't get that on any other platform. All of these things are there to enable you to reach the right person. And the more of these that you layer on top of each other, the more focused your audience becomes. Again, when we're talking about decision makers, we can identify job titles, business owners, CEOs, directors, department heads. Procurement is quite an interesting one. I've done quite a few campaigns on LinkedIn in the last 12 months where we've used a sales and procurement audience, purely because we're trying to get in front of people who almost control the finances. So those are the people that we want to kind of connect with and have a conversation with. But again, you can see there in terms of job titles, seniority, skills, etc. All of that is available. I would encourage you, if you're kind of going to use this and kind of look into it, don't spend 5 minutes, don't spend 5 hours either, but spend somewhere in between actually going into the system and understanding what's available to you. Just adding that extra little bit of information to your audience can make all the difference. With LinkedIn as well, there's kind of, an extra level. There always is with LinkedIn in terms of business, but you can go a bit beyond the norm. We give our information about our education to LinkedIn, what school we went to, what university, have we got degrees, etc. You can literally target people based on that as well. And again, it's a layer that you can add in there. It doesn't have to be on its own, because obviously if you were targeting everyone who has a degree in the UK, that's a lot of people. But if you use it strategically as a layer within your audience makeup, it can again get you a bit more focus. There are the standard stuff as well within LinkedIn. It's based on 2 things. Obviously, again, you'll put what you're interested in on your profile, which is great. But LinkedIn, same as other platforms, it will identify what you engage with on the platform as well. So not only is it looking at what you've given up freely, but are you engaging with content that's very much travel and tourism focused, or are you engaging with content that's very much construction focused? That will kind of attach itself to you and to your profile to a degree, and marketers again can use that to establish audience details. I've mentioned again about you're putting all this effort in at the front end. Make sure you don't lose that kind of that information or the data gained from all of this long term, by making sure that you capture that data and create lists that you can use later on. And again, we'll talk about that when we come to the strategy. But there are retargeting options, going back to people, revisiting people, and making sure that you're kind of connecting with them at the right time. If your audience, they're at the top of the funnel, you're going to have to reach them more than once. So retargeting is essential in that respect. We've talked about some of the formats. Again, we'll go into a bit more detail towards the end in terms of how you might use them. But we've got some pretty standard kind of formats here. Sponsored content. Whenever we're looking at something like LinkedIn or Facebook, Instagram, for instance, we've got our news feed, and it's there where on that feed where we have the opportunity to put some content. We've got the opportunity to put sponsored messaging into direct message ads that get delivered straight into a LinkedIn inbox. Strategically, that makes real sense as a follow-up as well. And I'll explain that in a bit more detail later. And we've got straightforward text ads. There are some really kind of bog standard stuff there that we can use. As well as those, we do have a few extra features in LinkedIn. The dynamic ad side of things is very interesting, particularly if you've got a very interesting strategic approach to what you want to do that isn't just first touch, last touch, but it does involve maybe phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, because dynamically you can use the information that you gain from phase 1, phase 2 to influence the next phase of your marketing, and you can use dynamic insertion to actually name check people and reference the vertical they're in, etc., etc. And again, there's a few examples at the end of this presentation that maybe highlight that in a bit more detail. Video content is massive, not just on LinkedIn, but all over right now. It's one of those, I think, again, I mentioned we've become a bit more sophisticated in terms of what we will engage with on digital platforms. It's not necessarily enough to have a few lines of text anymore. Sometimes that's what's needed, but very often what people want now is something a bit more engaging, a bit more dynamic, and video ticks lots of those boxes. If you can create video content, that's great. I know a few years ago there was a bit of a barrier or reluctance to get involved in that from a production perspective, but you don't have to create War and Peace or Lawrence of Arabia. It's not that kind of content. So long as it's kind of 15-30 seconds of a nice clean video that gets the point across, that's far more interesting now to most audiences on most platforms than trying to sum that up in 90 characters in a quick sentence or description. So again, video ads is a great way to engage your audience. If you can create your own content, that's great. There are other options out there, more and more options than there ever were around video content and creation. One of the other things that's quite interesting about marketing on LinkedIn, you can keep the person on LinkedIn. Sometimes what we often find is that if people are going from a platform to a website, it's a bit of a leap. It can be a bit of a leap. If the website is not necessarily doing a good job, sometimes it's not even fit for purpose, that can be the weak link. Now, I'm not saying lead gen forms and keeping people on the platform is a fix for that. It certainly isn't. If your website isn't performing as it should be, you need to do something about that. But very often, from a professional perspective and a B2B perspective, people are very happy and comfortable to stay on the platform and engage with businesses via LinkedIn, as opposed to engaging with them on their own websites, on their own kind of content. So do bear that in mind, because lead gen forms are a great way of fostering or starting a conversation, particularly on LinkedIn. There's a few things here in terms of the data that you do capture. I've mentioned already that you kind of put a lot of effort into all of this. It's a shame to kind of see it go to waste. The audience network side of things is interesting, because when you do start to look at the data that's available to you, you will see where people worked, what their job title was, all those different layers of targeting that we talked about. You'll be able to get reports on all of that and turn that back into audience lists, audience targeting options, etc., etc. So that's all inherent and built in with the system. And on the back of that, you can produce lookalike audiences. So if you know that you've kind of got a list of people that are your absolute essential customers, they're the bankers, if you like, you can actually say to the system, create a lookalike audience based on this audience list that I've got here. It's a way of scaling your activity without having to go through the whole process of redoing all your targeting, and not very often just getting to the same point. So that's an interesting option that comes up in terms of targeting. The first point on this slide, though, is first-party data. For a couple of years now, there's been a big conversation within the world of digital marketing about the fact that we were losing or have lost third-party data through cookies and cookie consent. One of the big ways to kind of combat that and deal with that and mitigate it to a certain degree is to make sure that you're using first-party data. So LinkedIn, as with all platforms now, affords you the opportunity to update your own customer database and use that information to tell the system who it is that you want to work with. It's not the same as remarketing. It's an indicator as to who your ideal audience would be. And again, there's a right and a wrong way to use it. But if you've got first-party data, you can use it to improve performance on LinkedIn and other platforms. By first-party data, I mean if you've got a customer list and a database, that's the kind of first point of call. But first-party data can also be people who've signed up to a newsletter. They will have to have given some sort of form of consent to be on that list. And provided you've told them that you're going to be using that data for marketing kind of campaigns and stuff, you've ticked all the boxes. It can be people who enter competitions. It can be, there are lots of different ways that you can kind of encourage people to give up that first party data and consent to be on the list. So do bear that in mind, because it's becoming more and more important. And as we enter the world of AI, and as machine learning becomes more inherent and plugged into all of these platforms, that first party data becomes more and more important as well, because it's the information you're giving the machine that it can then use to kind of come up with great ideas and great performance for you. And we are obviously being encouraged to use the machines more and more as we go forward. Finally, in terms of targeting, I've mentioned already about the engagement data. We can get reports through the platform for that we can turn back into targeting options. But obviously, from a B2B perspective, and for you guys on the call as well today, I guess, that firmographic data is key. You will have a list of businesses, literally business names that you want to connect with. You may even know the name of the person you want to connect with. Someone did actually ask me a few years ago, gave me a list of 5 people and said, can I target those on LinkedIn? You can't do that. Obviously, there has to be a certain point where anonymity kicks in. But I knew where those people worked and what their job titles were, and I was able to get as close as possible to those people. So again, the firmographic data is really important. No problem if someone has to drop out. Make sure you're measuring performance. You know, I did a presentation the other day where we went into a lot of detail with some business owners about their understanding of KPIs and goals. Make sure you're measuring your performance, and make sure you understand what a KPI, key performance indicator, is compared to a goal. KPIs are things like click-through rate. If people are engaging with your advertising, then your click-through rate should be quite healthy. It indicates that they're the right audience and they're responding to the message that you're putting out there. Those are KPIs. KPIs are, as the name suggests, they're an indication that you're on the right road to achieving your goal. KPIs are not goals. They are just the route, the kind of the roadmap, if you like, or they're part of the roadmap to achieving your goals. The goals are the conversations you have, the inquiry forms that you generate, the business that is generated, the sales, etc., etc. So make sure that you are measuring all of this, and there are ways to do that within all the platforms, including LinkedIn. Some of the things that I would encourage you to look at are impressions and reach. Are you reaching your desired audience? If you're not, then suggest you look at your audience targeting and see if there's any mistakes that you're making there. But first of all, have a look at your reach and make sure that you're getting your message out there. Then look at how that audience who you've reached are responding in terms of engagement. So track not only stuff like click-through rates, but how many people are liking your content, sharing it, are people commenting on it, all that kind of stuff. And then finally, make sure that you have enabled some sort of conversion tracking in place to measure the outcome. Now, the outcome may be engagement, so you can stop there, and that's the whole point of the marketing. But very often you will want to take it on and do something a bit more interesting with it. Again, in terms of reporting, make sure you are looking at that final point. A good way to do that would be through UTM tracking. If you put a little bit of code on the end of your URL that you're sending people to on your website, that can then be picked up through analytics packages like Google Analytics 4, and makes you the bigger picture in terms of what your audience are doing more identifiable within that platform. That's not to say there are not some really interesting reports within LinkedIn as well that you should be looking at as well. But do bear in mind that you want to have that ultimate aim, and you want to be able to track it, because you want to put an outcome and a cost on the performance that you're getting. So I'm conscious of time. I think we've got probably enough time just to cover the last few slides. I want to leave you with a few ideas in terms of how you might actually use this practically from a strategic perspective. Obviously, we can't go in and kind of create something and set it up and do the whole thing within an hour, but the principles that kind of will underpin your marketing activity, we should be able to kind of give you some insight and something to take away today. So what I've got here on this slide is a kind of outline of a strategy. It's based around lead gen. So it would be trying to get people to contact you and foster that, or that conversation, and start to develop that relationship. So there's a few steps that I've kind of outlined here that you might want to do that. First of all, look at top of funnel. Start to build your brand awareness. Use sponsored content and video ads to introduce your brand to the right audience. Again, we're talking at top of funnel here. So the options available to you in terms of ad format are quite wide and far-reaching, and you will be going after volume here. It's a great way to kind of get your brand out there. It's not at all throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, because you still have that control over the audience. You have control over the demographic, the location, the scheduling. All of that is still under your control, but it is that kind of reach and visibility that you want to be looking at. Step two, on the back of that, you're going to gain a lot of information about who engages. So your reach and visibility may have reached 100,000 people for simplicity's sake, but your data and the reports that you're getting back say, actually, only 30,000 people of those engaged with my content. Okay, ring fence that as your next audience. And step two would be to retarget those people with some sort of incentive as to why they need to kind of keep looking at you as a brand, and start fostering that relationship, as I say. Through retargeting, give them a white paper, let them download a PDF or an ebook that you've got, or give them access to a bit of content online that's behind a paywall, for instance, something like that. Give them something that they can feel is of value, and it ticks that next box. From there, again, you can start to look at the data from the people who engaged and then engaged again and downloaded, all of that kind of stuff. You can then look at stage three and say, okay, well, we've now got a few thousand people here. Let's dynamically go back to them with some message ads that drop into their inbox, and actually say to them, hey, Charlotte, I understand you work in the law industry, the solicitor's firm. Aren't the challenges facing the whole industry right now huge and look like this? And be very personal in terms of that third step. That drops in. They're already aware of you because at least twice they've connected with you on that reach and then on that kind of problem solving basis. So they already know who you are. So the chances are they'll be interested in what you've got to say. And hopefully that next step is for them to kind of make the leap and get in touch with you. You then kind of recycle that, go back to it, optimize it, refine it, etc., and make sure it's doing exactly what it should. But there's a very simple process there in terms of what you might do. From a perspective of law firms specifically, just to recap, I guess, in terms of why you might do this, you're afforded the platform affords you an audience who are really high value. If we use an example of something on Google, for instance, there are millions and millions and millions of people using Google every minute of the day. Not all of them are high value. They go from this end of the spectrum to this end of the spectrum and all points in between. With LinkedIn, that's filtered, it's edited, however you want to kind of phrase it. But you know that your high value customers, clients, relationships are on LinkedIn. There's no question. So you've kind of cut out the wheat from the chaff there immediately. Your targeting options, as we've said, are really strong. If there's a specific aspect to your business that your strengths, you can tap into that. So do you, for instance, is your business, is your kind of a solicitor firm, is it all about head injuries? Well, again, there are avenues there. If you can identify that or know that and understand that, there are avenues there in terms of targeting that open doors. There's obviously a sports elements there. There's an element to kind of adventure and travel. I know from experience there's an age demographic there that could come into play. Lots of things that you can kind of tap into. Showcase your legal expertise. Again, be the smartest person in the room, I think is the way I phrased it earlier. But essentially be the authority in your space. Again, if we're talking about, you're a specialist in helping people with head injuries and compensation and that kind of thing, share that content with those people, with that audience, and make sure that they know that you are the the authority. You're the person to go to. You've got all the answers. You can help advise, all that kind of stuff. And again, you know, if we're talking about generating leads, the options there are far and wide. I know no business sort of does one thing. So there are lots of things that every business offers, either in terms of products or services. Do campaigns for each one. Don't do a one size fits all. Look at everything individually and do it properly. And again, when we're talking about LinkedIn, that whole thought leadership is key. It's not something you can do once. You have to be involved in ongoing, but it will pay dividends. I'm going to skip this slide. It kind of recaps on a few things that we've already talked about. But what I want to go into, just to finish, is how paid and organic can complement each other in terms of what you might do practically for each of those. Very often when I do presentations to businesses, the organic side of things is where they're more familiar with. You know, you post on your Facebook page, you post on your LinkedIn page. It's that kind of side of things that you're familiar with. It's not necessarily the paid side of things, and that's why you're listening to me. You want to understand how that works and how you can utilize that. So this slide here, I've got a couple of examples here of how organic and paid can help each other and form part of a strategy, an ongoing strategy, and complement each other, not work against each other or in isolation. So the first example here would be brand awareness and credibility. From an organic perspective, you may already be ticking those boxes in terms of thought leadership. You're doing regular company updates that involve updates about your employees, your business, etc., and also offer an insight into the industry that you work in as well. So, you know, organically, your credibility, your awareness, you're doing something about that. Unless you're a huge business, that's going to have limited reach. You're going to reach your tried and tested audience. LinkedIn won't show you to a new audience. It will show you to the people who already know you, like you, follow you, etc., etc. Now that grows over time as people share your content, obviously. But what you want to do with that from a paid perspective is amplify it. So turn that thought leadership content into campaigns and deliver that to an audience who aren't following you, using those targeting options that we've already talked about. Second option there, or second kind of thing to think about, is lead generation and conversion. So from an organic perspective, you are trying to foster relationships. It can be a slow burner, but you are engaging with people. You're sharing content, as we've already said, and you're reaching out. You're asking people to kind of have a conversation with you. That can also filter offline as well, and there are elements there that obviously naturally you'll be doing. To complement that and to help kind of grow that side of things from a paid perspective, what you want to do is share that sponsored content that you've been creating and link it to lead gen form campaigns. Now, again, they can be very simple and you're just asking people for their opinion and that you're capturing their data like that. Or it can be very specific, you know, give us your details and we'll get back in front of you, or we'll get back in touch with you and we'll have a conversation. But it is the kind of first point of call to measuring the impact of what you're doing from a conversion perspective. So again, an interesting one to look at in terms of what you might do. Finally, I've mentioned content synergy and retargeting. Again, this is probably further down the line if you're not there already. But from an organic perspective, again, you've got lots of content, lots of engagement, and lots of insights from your audiences. So turn that into something. Use all that data from a paid perspective and plug it into a campaign that you've physically created and focus on getting conversions. There's a couple more examples here of what that might look like from a practical perspective. So we've got some examples of you know, organic and paid content that you could create. Again, stuff that we've probably already covered on some of the earlier slides. I'm assuming we are going to share this deck as well, Alex. I don't need to answer me right now. But again, a few interesting ideas there on how organic and paid might complement each other. You can probably tell I'm trying to rush this because I do want to see if there's any questions at the end. But conclusion there, LinkedIn provides law firms with a powerful platform. It is where B2B professionals, etc., are going to be and where you can find them. There's lots of formats, there's lots of targeting options there that you can tap into. And obviously, from a practical perspective, you have that level of control that means you can use the platform and the delivery methods within it to achieve your goals, essentially. So I think we did okay and covered most things there. Does anyone have any questions on any of that?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay.
You're very comprehensive. Thank you, Mick.
I hope that's why we have questions.
We do have one question.
Okay.
Oh, a couple of questions.
Excellent. We like questions.
We had some raised hands there. Were those questions?
Let me see if I can see some.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I can't see anyone. Raise your voice if you've got a question.
If not, then I will, as Mick said, I'll get this deck out to everyone who's joined, and there are some people who couldn't as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me, and we can get those to Mick, and I can get those answered for you. The rest of the webinar series is going to be kind of a pre-recorded, because we do have some people who can't make these sessions. So they'll still be coming out on the dates that all of our Eventbrite pages say, but they will be pre-recorded, so you'll be able to watch those at your leisure. I'll be popping those on our YouTube channels and sharing them with everyone who's interested. And again, we'll be creating content out of those. And if you've got any questions, reach out to the team. But yeah, thank you so much, Mick, and thank you for everyone who attended this morning. Hope you have a fantastic day, and we'll see you for the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining, guys.
Bye.